Thank you. Hi, so I run NVBL Architects, and I'm going to be talking about Air and Stone tonight, which was a temporary shelter pavilion that we worked on for Clerkenwell Design Week in London in 2022. So for us, architecture is never still. It's always changing and disappearing over time. And so for this project, really the most important question for us was how fast would it disappear and how long could it actually hold? So like the ice melting, the project embraces an architecture that is in the moment, very much that it will last or not last, that it is ephemeral. As we can see here in a student project of mine last year, archiving 10,000 years, and the idea being that the model is the scale of time of the ice melting. So a project which is constantly moving, that is not fixed, reworked and maintained in order to exist, as Edith de Kind's work, where every hour, for 10 minutes, the project is actually trying to be contained. So as fast architecture, how do we become aware of the fragility of time? There are different times in relation to the city. So the site itself has been there for about 300 years. An architectural project is at least probably 30 years in the UK. And this is just a blip of time of only 3 days. As a temporary shelter, the most important elements for us were to really consider how to be environmentally conscious and what that meant for the temporality of the site. So we only worked with this idea of ground, stone, and air, sort of encapsulating the space that was hidden and not there. And stone is a material that we know quite well. We've worked on it on many different occasions with local craftsmen. Yet air is actually one that we've never really worked on as a material. So we were very inspired by Graven Stevens, who Alice has mentioned that is going to speak next month. And we really enjoyed this kind of fragility and temporality of the project, but also Hans Hacke, who talks about this idea of ephemeral systems. So we had never built an inflatable before, and we were told by many that actually it was a terrible idea and that we wouldn't do one ever again. But let's see, we haven't yet, so we'll find out. But the project came about thanks to actually a London Festival of Architecture bench that we built in 2021, all made of stone. And it just so happens that the director of Clerkenwell Design Week saw it and wanted to put it in an exhibition in Greenwich. But it couldn't go because we had to put it into a school in East London. Which it's still there, so we dismantled it and placed it there. But instead, I asked if there were any potential possibilities of working with him again in Clerkenwell Design Week, and just through asking, he said yes and had many opportunities. So there were a number of sites, of potential sites that we could choose from, and this is the one that we chose, so Clerkenwell Close, which is essentially like a pedestrian street, which has a few kind of offices, architectural offices mainly, along its side. And it's mainly made up of some large trees and lampposts. But what we loved about it is that actually it gave us the opportunity of making a space rather than, I think a lot of the other sites were quite busy. So here it is in 2022. And we quickly made a model just to kind of really start looking at the forms of the site. The city is constantly moving, and so Clerkenwell also used to be a village for London. And here we can see that, in fact, before it was a nunnery and a convent. But on this map, particularly on the top right, you'll see that actually it used to be an old prison on the site, and Clerkenwell Close didn't exist. The prison itself being a crucifix form, and then that prison turned into a boarding school. The site itself, you can see coming from the north, has direct views, and then actually from the south, you have to turn into it. So that was really important to us to see. During Clerkenwell Design Week, the site sits between two very important core event spaces. So one is the old prison, which is called the new prison, basement, which actually used to house baths and fuminating rooms before a lot of the prisoners would go into the main wings, but also the Spa Fields, which is the old burying ground. And so we sit as this kind of in-between transit space. And the project gave us an incredible amount of freedom. So the client actually asked pretty much nothing of us, which was extremely rare. So we basically came up with a concept brief and all the way to construction. I was quite dubious, in fact. It sort of seemed strange that the client wanted to know nothing about the project until we actually met for the health and safety check when it was in construction on site. So that was quite worrying, but it all worked out well, so that's good. But we did set ourselves a brief that was quite clear in 4 points. So first was to connect these 2 points. So creating a room in the street, sort of a public square, this idea of allowing people to pause and gather in a space of transit. But also what was very important for us was actually to create a beacon that you would see from these 2 points. So the materiality was essential, that it was large, that it was clear from 2 different areas. The other one, that it had to be very fast in construction. So it had to be built in 3 days. It was only up for 3 days, and then it has to be dismantled very quickly on the 4th day. So that was only with hand tools as well. The other thing had to be extremely affordable. So our budget was £8,000, but I wanted to actually make some money for the office to pay for our time. So we wanted to do it for £4,000. And lastly, it had to be extremely sustainable in as many ways as possible. So no disruption to the site, a reduction of materials to the minimum, reclaim natural and reusable biodegradable materials, whilst also dismantling and thinking about the afterlife of the piece. The process for us is the project, not the outcome, and enjoying the unexpected experimentation of the design development through testing, drawing, and modelling was essential. So here we can see a design development, really, of this bubble, or whatever you want to call it, this blip in the moment of the space. So for us, the question was, what are the gestures we can introduce? So would it be to fill, to block, to shift, to push, to lean on, to add, to attach, to suspend, or just to surrender to the elements of the site? So first we considered the air becoming the space, so filling the entire space. Otherwise, removing access was quite a fun idea for us, so forcing people to interact with it. But sadly, it felt like it didn't quite work with the idea of it being a public space that without supervision and someone could potentially suffocate themselves, so that wasn't potentially the best. And otherwise, we thought, well, actually, maybe we should raise the roof so you could see it from a distance. And we worked with a series of different solutions, this idea of potentially creating a scaffold or using helium, but helium is extremely expensive and also quite hard to find nowadays. There's very little of it left. And so until 10 days before construction, we actually had this design as set to be constructed. So we'd pretty much spec'd the whole thing. This is just a detail on site, and these are engineer notes. So in the end, I just felt like it didn't quite work. It felt unnecessary to have quite a heavy structure for a very light one that it was supporting. And so I wondered if actually we could use the trees on site, which previously we were told we couldn't use anything of the site. It wasn't allowed. But I thought that actually if we protected them, and it was only up for 3 days, so why not try? And so we deviated. We came to the conclusion that actually we should kind of use the stone and just use the trees and the lampposts. And these are a few models to show that. So this is the first sketch that we sent to the structural engineer just after many different iterations, really like using the trees, the lamps, and also suspending from them without introducing any further structure, made only from biodegradable TPU and held down by 3 tons of reclaimed stone footings, which you could then sit on. And then we were hoping to negotiate with the neighbours to use their plug for air, which we were still not sure of, and this was a week before. The model. So very much a conversation with the site, allowing what is there to make up for most of the materiality. The structure is more of a parasite for the moment, holding on to the existing site, and the site doesn't exist without it. I mean, strange because there's no trees or lampposts in this drawing, but let's just move on, it doesn't matter. So the office for about 2 months became a testing ground and a workshop. So allowing for us to really just test the inflatables in different scales, experimenting with form, connections, valves, systems, eyelets, and they basically took over every space. So this is the final set of drawings. So this is the ground floor plan where the stone sits, placed on site. I missed one. And there's essentially two horizontal surfaces that hold two elements at different levels. So there's the air that's containing the unseen and the ground, which is stone. And this is a balancing act that plays off between one another in order to counteract the potential existing forces that could come. And we see the inflatables and then how that comes together. So the stone was generously given to us by the stone masonry company. They just happened to have quite a lot of boulders that they weren't using anywhere. So they said that as long as we delivered it to site, we could have it. So we set out the dimensions and weights of each stone and checked with the structural engineer where we should place them according to the structure of the inflatables. And it's very much a simple act of displacement in this case. So the stones were assembled, packed, and on crates, which was the easiest way to actually deliver. It was only about £100 per crate, and delivered directly to the site a day before. And you can see here there's markings of where the stones would go. But despite the rigor of the drawings and consideration beforehand, in fact, when on site, it was quite intuitive, and you had to basically, they're extremely heavy, and there was very little time. So it was essentially just placing them as fast as we could, where we could, but with the kind of drawing set. So embracing that unpredictability. And then, so Price and Myers were the structural engineers, and I think maybe like 4 days before, they came up with a system to attach to the stone with eye bolts and resin, and just a quick series of how we installed the metal, the steel thread onto the stones themselves. The inflatables were really designed in a similar way, so we'd already designed them anyway, no matter what the structure was going to be, and they were a series of drawings to kind of consider what area we needed. The construction schedule mainly was actually of like printouts that we could cut, so we could cut them on the floor mostly, iron them. Actually, a colleague of mine was telling me that she hasn't ironed since this day, because there was a lot of ironing involved, and 2 weeks of it. And assembling, testing, and sometimes testing in different environments and weathers as well, to make sure that if we needed to maintain or kind of repair any. Our office then moved to site for those 3 days. And this is just showing how everything started to come together. So it was a series of modular systems, which were then choreographed only with quick connections, so from thimbles to cable ties, actually on site, and with no disruption to the site. So you can see here that this is a series of on-site pictures. We basically got a scaffold tower for 2 days, and 3 workmen who were working with me on another project who just happened to come for those 3 days, who helped. So we first had the stone on site, they drilled the holes, then they started to put the structure onto the trees, and then one by one, each inflatable went up. So it was, as I said, it was made in 3 days on site, and it was only using hand tools. And I did go to Leyland's quite a lot, though, because we were missing a few bits and pieces. But otherwise, it was filled up daily. I don't think our making was always as good as it could have been, but we did find ways to speed it up as well. And so here we can see the project from a distance. So it did the job of becoming this beacon that you could see, especially around the corner, my favorite part. And we had 7 inflatables initially, but now we have 6, mainly because we did have one at the front that we decided actually not to use. It was just a decision as soon as it went up to remove it. And then connections with the stone. There were a few days of rain, however, in May. So despite keeping visitors dry, some water did enter some of the inflatable, which actually was quite beautiful. So I quite enjoyed that. It was dismantled in about 30 minutes on the 4th day. The TPU was kept and reused. The stone was sent to landscape in Cornwall. And the TPU here has been used in a few different projects, so in lifted ground, another project we worked on, and then for covering carpets, etc., in different projects review. And so rethinking the ground, and actually the project's not still, but a temporal living architecture, which remains only in photos now, but actually still exists in parts in other ways. However, fragility remains in its disappearance. Thank you.